But if you want to go camera off, that's absolutely fine. If you could mute yourself during the presentation as well, that might be helpful as well, because you always get random. I've got dogs, so dogs will always start barking as soon as I'm trying to say something or listening to something important on one of these calls. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to the capable hand, my colleague Kelly, who's going to kick off this workshop properly.
You're on mute.
Okay, right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so thanks, Andy, for the introduction. Before I go on to talking about iNaturalist, I'm just going to briefly talk about biological recording. So what actually is a biological record? So essentially, a biological record is a burst of information about an encounter with a living organism. But there are kind of four key elements to a biological record, and that is what, so the name of the organism you saw, where, the location that you saw the organism, when, the date that you saw the organism, and who, the name of the person that recorded it and the person who identified it. So when you're identifying an organism, it doesn't have to be super sort of specific. It doesn't have to be all the way to species level. You can still identify things to levels like genus or even family, as that is still useful, and someone else might be able to help you identify things further, as long as you include evidence like photos. Location, you can have descriptions and addresses, and grid references are very helpful. When you saw it, it doesn't have to be a specific day and time. It can be as broad as a year, and who is pretty self-explanatory. And having this information makes sure that the records are sort of useful, and without those pieces of information, records are kind of far less reliable. So why does that actually matter? So for biological records, they're important because we effectively cannot protect what we do not know exists. Effective conservation depends on reliable and available records of good quality. So, for example, if a protected or a rare species is recorded in an area, those conservation measures can be focused to that area. And again, we can only know that with the records. So some examples are, we can track whether a species is sort of increasing in distribution or in population, or decreasing, if it's changing its range, and generally how it changes over time. So now I'm going to talk about iNaturalist. So iNaturalist is really two things at its core. It's a free tool to help you identify and record wildlife, and it's a community of nature enthusiasts and scientists contributing to a global data set of biodiversity. It exists in two forms, an app and a website. The app is useful for kind of on-the-go records and identifications, whereas the website is helpful if you're taking lots of photos in bulk, for example, on a camera, and you want to upload them later. And it's a good way of exploring other people's observations as well on iNaturalist. So at the moment, it's slightly confusing, unfortunately, but two versions of the app exist. You have iNaturalist, which is sort of the latest, most up-to-date version, and iNaturalist Classic. So iNaturalist is actually only available for iPhone users, and that came out last year at some point. And I think the intention is that eventually everyone will be using iNaturalist, but everyone has access to iNaturalist Classic. So that's the app I'm going to be talking about today. So how do you actually make observations on iNaturalist? So on the app, you can take a photo of any wild organism, and the inbuilt species recognition software will actually help you identify what you've seen. iNaturalist will also capture other parts of other useful information, like where it was seen and when it was seen. But sometimes it doesn't automatically capture that information, so you may need to play around with permissions and settings. So when you're taking photos for biological recording, there are a few sort of tips and tricks that make the photo more useful. What I mean by that is it makes it easier for the species recognition tool to identify what you've seen, and it helps other people in the iNaturalist community refine your ID if you're not entirely sure what it is. So just going to go through those. So importantly, you should focus on only one species for each photo and really for each record you make. Try to avoid blurry photos, which seems simple enough, but when you're taking photos of things like birds or invertebrates, it can be a bit tricky. You can take multiple photos for the same observation, and that's useful if you need to capture different features that might help you identify something. Like for a tree, you might want to take a photo of the bark, the leaves, and any fruit or flowers. For a fungus, you might want to take a photo of the cap and the gills and the stem. And try and get up close and capture the small details. And zooming in or using a hand lens even can be really helpful there. Some more general tips for iNaturalist. As I was saying earlier, you need to make sure that certain permissions have been permitted, like location, so that it can automatically update your location, your camera if you want to take photos using the app, and your gallery if you want to take photos and then upload them later to iNaturalist. So when you're using iNaturalist and recording things, try to avoid captive and cultivated organisms. So that's things like pets or crops. And the line can get a little bit blurry, but generally we define captive or cultivated as an organism that exists in its location because of human intervention. But there are kind of exceptions to that, so just take it with a pinch of salt. A really important thing to remember is that the species recognition tool is not always right. It will always try and give you suggestions, but you do not have to sort of pick the top suggestion. If you're not sure what something is, the best thing to do is just to record it at a lower level, like even plant or bird, because other users on iNaturalist might know immediately what you've recorded. But if you leave the ID blank, it's going to be really hard for other people to find your observation. So yeah, that's it. Identifying a photo, uploading a photo identified as plant is still useful. And lastly, make sure your observations actually get uploaded. That's something that happened to me. I've been using iNaturalist for like a month and then realized I had a backlog of observations that hadn't actually been uploaded. So you can go into the settings and click automatic upload for that. Right, so I'm just going to run through a video of how to make an observation using iNaturalist and taking a photo on the app. So first of all, you need to make sure you've downloaded the app and also created an account. So when you open iNaturalist and you've created an account, it will take you to your observation page. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you've got the new observation button. And to take a photo, click take a photo. So now this is me. I've spotted a nice looking fungus. And as you can see, I'm zooming in to make sure it captures the whole screen. But I'm not happy with my photo. So I'm going to click retry and take it again. And there we are, I'm taking my photo. And now I'm happy, so I'm going to click OK. So as you can see, it's filling out the location and it's filled out the time information automatically. If you want to take another photo, you can click the bottom at the top left-hand corner. And take photo again. And here I've spotted another individual a bit further up that I want to include as part of the same observation. And I click OK again. So then if I want to get suggestions from iNaturalist from the software for what species I've seen, click what did you see? And iNaturalist is going to give some suggestions. And if you can see there, it says, we're pretty sure it's in this genus, which means I know the software is confident. If you click on it, it will give you some photos from species of that genus. And if you click compare, you can compare your photo with photos of species in that genus. So here we've got ruby elf cup, and we've got another species, scarlet elf cup. And you might notice that they're very similar. And I do actually know that you need spore prints really to differentiate them. So I'm going to stay at the level of genus, which is elf cup. Once you're happy that's your species, click select. And once you've made sure you've got the ID, the location and the time and your photos, then you can click the tick at the bottom. And then it uploads. And now I'm just going to run through that one more time, but this time I'm going to show uploading photos from your gallery. So this is useful again if you're out and about and you take lots of photos and you don't want to waste time uploading them all then and there, so you can upload them all later. And for this you need to give gallery access. So again, we're on observations page, but this time click on choose image and then go to your photos and in your gallery, choose the photos that you want to include. So those will add to your observation. And again, you can see the location and time are filled out. If you want to move the photos around, you can do it at the top there. And then we're going to click again on what did you see to get suggestions. So if you flick through the photos at the top, it will ID each photo separately, which is useful. And you can see we've got flower, a leaf, and the whole plant there. We'll click on the top suggestion, and it's saying primrose. And when we compare, you can see that it is definitely a primrose. So I'm going to select that as my species and then finish my observations. So I know everyone loves a video. That's it for the videos today. And we're moving on to the next part. So once you've uploaded an observation on iNaturalist, other users in the iNaturalist community can then take a look and see if they agree with the ID that you've made. And once 2 or more people agree on an ID, the record becomes what we call research grade and is kind of more useful as it's been verified, essentially. So I hope that all made sense. Now I'm going to move on to some other useful apps in wildlife recording that we think are pretty great. So I'm just going to touch on the latest version of iNaturalist. So that's the iPhone version I was talking about earlier. Essentially, they do the exact same thing. They work in the same way. They're for recording and identifying wildlife, but there are just a few new features. It's got a different look. It's got a feature that you can do sort of live suggestions. So you just point your camera at things and it will suggest things in real time. You can do things offline. And I think this is the best feature personally. It gives you a confidence level. So the species recognition software will give you a kind of percentage for how confident it is so that you can then make a more informed decision. And it's got a bulk import feature, which again is good for when you've taken lots of photos already and want to upload them together. Another totally different app is called Merlin. And for the birders out there, you might be really interested in this. So it's an app and it's got a feature called Sound ID. And it's basically you record your environment and it picks up bird songs and will ID them in real time. So it will give you suggestions for what species you're hearing. And the really great thing about Merlin is that you can actually upload audio files from Merlin onto iNaturalist. And as I was saying earlier, you can have that instead of photos. And that's really useful because, again, taking photos of birds can be really tricky. So this is a nice way of getting involved in recording birds without sort of fancy equipment. And lastly, another iNaturalist app. This is called Seek by iNaturalist. And again, it works in a similar way to iNaturalist Classic, but it's this live ID feature. And this is quite good for sort of getting younger people involved in recording, because you don't have to create an account. It gives you sort of challenges and things, and you can just keep a kind of personal observation log on there that doesn't get uploaded online or anything. And yeah, so, but you can optionally connect it to iNaturalist. So again, it works in that live way where you point your camera at things, and it gives you suggestions in real time. So that's it from my part of the presentation. Thanks, guys. I'm gonna let Andy take over now and talk about City Nature Challenge.
Okay, I'm going to unmute myself now. Let's hopefully.
That's okay. That was me.
Does that? Can people hear me? Okay, from this one. Wonderful. Yeah, thanks for bearing with us with our sound issue that can get very complicated when you're trying to do two laptops. So can everybody see my slides? Right. So we talked a little bit about iNaturalist, and to be honest, one of the main reasons that we really started promoting iNaturalist at the Record Centre is because we started taking part a few years ago in this challenge called the City Nature Challenge. Now the City Nature Challenge, it's annual global competition that takes place around the world, and it takes place over 4 days, normally sort of towards the end of April, which kind of isn't necessarily ideal for us in the UK, but it was set up by people in California, and that they felt that time of year sort of suited the worldwide kind of audience. So as much as we grumble about it, that's the date we stuck with. So basically over the 4 days, the idea is to try to record as much wildlife as possible. And this is using the iNaturalist app. So over those 4 days, what we try to do is to encourage people across Birmingham and the Black Country to go out with their phones or their cameras, take photos of wildlife and upload them onto iNaturalist, and any of these records will count towards our total. Last year there were 669 cities that took part around the world, and collectively they made 3.3 million observations. So there's basically a lot of wildlife recording that's concentrated on these 4 days all over the world. In the UK, there's quite a few city areas that take part. We're one of about 25, I think, in the UK. So we take part as Birmingham and the Black Country. Coventry and Warwickshire take part, for example, all of the other big cities as well. So we've kind of got a little bit of a competition almost going on with our other local rivals in the UK to see who can get the most records amongst us. This year, the challenge takes place from the 24th to the 27th of April. So as soon as midnight rolls around on the 24th, anything recorded in our area will start counting towards the challenge. As people upload records as part of the challenge, you get to see this live global leaderboard update, and this is the final leaderboard from last year's challenge, and you'll see that it's kind of dominated to a degree by cities in incredibly diverse areas, in some cases almost sort of tropical areas. So La Paz in Bolivia took top spot, and there's some American cities in there as well that tend to be near the top. In the UK, we're kind of slightly hamstrung by the fact it's not the ideal time of year for us. It's springtime, you know, you're getting lots of woodland species that are just about appearing. You'll have quite a few invertebrates out and about if it's warm and sunny. If it's not warm and sunny, then you're lucky to see a single butterfly. And particularly from a Birmingham Black Country point of view, we don't have a coastline either, so that kind of puts us at a slight disadvantage compared to some of these city areas with like massive coastlines and like a huge variety of habitats. So like I said, we're one of 26-ish UK cities taking part, and for an observation to count towards our total in the City Nature Challenge, it needs to be of a wild species. Kelly already touched on the difference between a wild and a cultivated species. So as we said, with pets and domestic cows and things like that obviously wouldn't count. When it comes to plants, it's a little bit more tricky to decide what's wild and what's not. Garden species can count if they're kind of growing wild, if they're kind of spread out from their original planting, and obviously any garden weeds would absolutely count towards this. And as long as the observation is made within our boundary, so our boundary in this case includes Birmingham and the 4 main Black Country areas, being Dudley, Sandwell, Walsall and Wolverhampton. And if it's made within these 4 days and uploaded by the 10th of May, then it counts. You don't need to do anything like join the project. It's all automatic. So if you just take a picture in our area on our iNaturalist and upload it, will automatically count. You don't need to click anything to say you joined our iNaturalist project or anything like that. It's really quite straightforward. This is just a little bit about what we recorded last year. So we managed to get sort of 12,500 observations of 1,500 different species, which, as you can imagine, is an amazing effort. Like to get over 1,000 species recorded over 4 days within our boundaries is quite impressive. And as you can imagine, we had all sorts of species specialists out there trying to look for their niche species. We had moss experts trying to record mosses, bee experts recording bees and such forth, just to try to get our species total as high as possible. We were out of the 26 UK cities. We finished 5th by number of observations and 4th by number of species. This is actually the first time that we haven't finished first in these measures in the time that we've been competing. So we really want to kick it up a bit of a notch this year. We've got, and this is why we're running this workshop, we've also got some very exciting events sort of planned as part of the challenge, which we'll be able to share details of soon. But certainly from a Eco Record and Wildlife Trust point of view, I think we're going to have events on pretty much every day during the 4 days of the challenge. So that's what we want to aim for this year. We want to try and, first of all, beat our total from last year. We always try to go one better than ourselves, and then try to finish above Manchester and Liverpool, really. So if you wanted to take part in the City Nature Challenge, obviously as an individual, it's simple. Just go out, take some photos, upload them to iNaturalist. If you're part of a group and you wanted to hold your own City Nature Challenge event, that's super easy as well. So if you're part of a group that does regular volunteering and you happen to have an event anyway on that day and you want to just add on a bit of recording at the end of it, it could just be literally taking 10 minutes, encouraging people to go out with their phones, take pictures and upload them. But we do have some specific kind of ideas for how to focus people if you wanted to try to do biological recording as part of an event. So, you know, this is a whole spectrum. You could have something that's completely structured. You're looking for a particular species in a particular habitat. You could have people are trying to record birds, or it could just literally be getting people to go out, look for as many different things as possible across the site you're on and just take pictures of basically everything. So it could be as simple or as complex as you want, really. There's no one size fits all with this. So there's things you might want to think about, like an event focus. For example, we're going to be doing a moth trap event as one of our events, which obviously will focus on that particular group and get people to come along who are interested in moths. And you know, you think about habitats on your site. Do you have different habitats where you're looking? If so, it's worth looking at things like the like hedges and what's living in there, looking at grasslands, looking in ponds. Just almost like divide up your site in your mind as to what are the different species that are likely to be occupying the site, and just make sure that you hit all of those key parts of that site. And also your audience as well. Is your audience people who are already kind of well versed in biological recording? Do you already have some naturalists there? Are you working with people who are complete beginners? It could be that you're even working with a school group. So it's about thinking what activity sort of fits the kind of the group, the audience that you've got. Events I've led before, just simply a led walk where we go on a walk and just take photos sort of along. It's almost like a transect, I guess. You're doing a transect of a site and getting people to take photos. And we've also done invertebrate recording events before where we specifically focused on that. And obviously for these kind of events, you might want to bring along specific equipment like butterfly nets and beating trays and things like that. So equipment is another thing to sort of think about in terms of what's going to allow you to record the most number of species. So there's some things you would want to consider if you're building iNaturalist into an event. And I find it useful before the event is to encourage people to download the app already and make sure they've already got an account. That means you're basically all ready to go when the event starts. You know, you don't need to be teaching people how to download the app or create accounts. You've already kind of got over that first step. And also you need to think about what equipment you might need for the event. Like I said, butterfly nets are great for catching things that are far away. It's quite hard to photograph moving invertebrates, so nets can really help with that. You might want to also designate someone to be recording sound. You might want to make sure that people bring sort of proper cameras, non-phone cameras with them, which will have better zoom, which will allow you to better photograph things like birds and invertebrates and things like that. But during the event, basically set out what you intend to do at the start of the event. What do we want to record? What do we want to focus on? Maybe divide people into groups and give them all a particular focus. Like you will go and look at the pond and record anything around the pond. You go and make recordings of birds. And just make sure that if you're doing something like a wildlife walk, that you take time to stop and maybe like spend 10 minutes or so just where you are to get people to take photos. Because we found from experience, if you're leading a continuous walk where you're just kind of continuously walking, then people aren't really going to be people won't have time to sort of really stop and take pictures of things. You'll just have people focusing on sort of interesting things you're seeing along the walk, which is brilliant fun, which is a great event. Everyone enjoys it. But if you're thinking purely in terms of the aim of recording wildlife, you're not going to be recording much wildlife if you're sort of taking that approach. And then think about at the end of the event, how do you want to look at what you've recorded? Do you like have a little debrief at the end where you kind of compare pictures of interesting things you've seen? What we tend to do is maybe offer a little bit of an incentive, like the person who's taken the most pictures on a certain and uploaded them on a certain walk might get some sort of prize. That could be a slice of cake. It could be a wildlife book, wildlife guides, things like that. So it's worth thinking about like a little bit of competition element as part of the events. We found that works really well. And then after the event, obviously make sure that records are uploaded. It's really one thing we've found is quite useful as well. In iNaturalist, what you can do is you can set up something called a project. Now, a project is basically a set of rules that says what records are included in that project. So you can upload a site boundary, for example. We've just created a project where we've got our boundary for Moseley Bog Nature Reserve uploaded onto iNaturalist, and any observations that are within that boundary are then within that project. So you can see what's been recorded in Moseley Bog, what the how many records there are, what the most recorded species is, who's done the most recording. So these are really good ways if you're doing recording on a site regularly, like say if you're part of a friends of group and you want to set up your own project, that's something that we can potentially help you with. So if you are interested in learning more about that, please do get in touch and we can talk about helping to upload a boundary for you as part of that. And this is just a list. This was a bit of a brainstorm that we did, just different types of events that you might want to consider. And this is so things like I said, an element of competition. If you're doing something with kids, the Seek app is quite good for that. It's a little bit more accessible, I think, for younger people, and then you can still make sure you upload those observations at the end. Camera traps are quite good. If anyone's got wildlife cameras out there, that's a really good way of documenting mammals, for example, that you wouldn't easily see during the day. And then you can I find it's easier. You can't upload videos on iNaturalist. So what I tend to do with that is just take a screenshot of a still image of that video. So if you've captured a badger, just as long as you can tell that it's a badger in that image, then that will count as a record. I mean, just to focus on photos for a moment, I know that Raquel said try and avoid blurry photos, but as long as you can tell what the species is from the photo, it's absolutely fine. You don't need to be an expert photographer to be uploading records. As long as someone can look at that, if it's a really blurred picture of a jay, but you can still tell that it's definitely a jay, then that's absolutely fine. It's not a photography competition. I've got a whole gallery of pictures that I've taken myself of very blurred insects where you can kind of tell what it is, but it's never going to win any awards. And like I said, there's things like habitat specific things here that you can look at. You could even just focus on weeds. So if you've got an allotment group you could just get everyone to go out and try and spot as many kind of those spontaneously growing sort of plant species as possible within allotments. So that was just, yeah, some ideas on how to build in recording as part of an event. That was a little bit of a quick kind of run through of that. But really that brings us to that's the end of the main presentation. And if anyone's got any questions, then we would love to answer them.